The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in the room. Amber sat cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through endless tabs, her earbuds dangling loose around her neck. She was supposed to be writing a paper for class, but concentration had abandoned her hours ago. The late-night quiet had its own gravity, pulling her deeper into distraction. YouTube, social media, random streams from people she'd never met. The usual mindless noise that helped her feel less alone at night. A notification pinged. New live stream recommended for you. She frowned. The thumbnail was strange, just a dimly lit bedroom. No host smiling for the camera, no flashy graphics, no game footage. Just a room. Plain. Empty. The title, Live, Watch Her Sleep. Amber's lip curled. Creepy. Why would YouTube even recommend something like that? She hovered over the tab, ready to close it, then hesitated. Curiosity had always been her weakness, and something about the still image tugged at her. With a small shake of her head, she clicked. The stream loaded instantly. The screen showed a bedroom. The angle was from above, like a camera mounted in a corner of the ceiling. A girl lay asleep under soft blankets, her breathing slow and steady. Amber squinted, leaning closer. The girl was young, her age maybe 20. Dark hair spread across the pillow. Her room was small, cluttered but normal enough. A desk, a dresser, a closet door slightly ajar. Nothing unusual, just a stranger asleep. Amber muttered under her breath. Why am I watching this? She dragged the cursor toward the little X to close it. But before she could click, the girl on screen shifted in her sleep. Her face turned toward the camera. Amber froze. Her stomach twisted violently. Her breath caught. Because the girl wasn't just some stranger. It was her. Her own face. Her own room. Her own bed. Amber's pulse skyrocketed. She tore her eyes from the screen, scanning the shadows of her real bedroom. Same blanket. Same dresser. Same faint crack in the paint near the window. Her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the laptop. She slammed it shut and leapt to her feet, eyes darting around. The corners of her room were empty. The closet was closed. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater. But the thought screamed through her mind. There's a camera. There has to be a camera. Her breaths came fast, shallow. She grabbed her phone, switching on the flashlight, and began tearing the room apart. Under the bed, behind the books on the dresser, inside the closet, nothing. Her heart hammered as she swept the light across the ceiling, the corners, the air vent. No glint of glass. No blinking light. Where is it? She whispered aloud, voice trembling. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her hand. She nearly screamed. A new message from an unknown number. Keep watching. Amber's fingers went numb. She dropped the phone onto the carpet, staring at it in horror. The message pulsed in her brain. Keep watching. She shook her head violently. No, I'm not doing this. But even as she said it, she found herself opening the laptop again. The stream was still live. Her sleeping self was still there, chest rising and falling. Except her eyes were open now, wide, staring straight at the camera. Amber's stomach lurched. Her real hands flew to her face, clawing at her skin, her eyes. She was awake. She knew she was awake. So how could her double on-screen be staring like that? The figure on the stream began to move. Slowly, deliberately. Her own body sat up in bed, dark hair falling across her face. She watched herself lean toward the camera. Too close. The pixels distorted, breaking into static as her double's face filled the frame. And then, in a voice that wasn't her own but seemed to vibrate directly through the speakers, it spoke, "Don't look away." Amber slammed the laptop shut again. This time she hurled it across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud. Her body shook uncontrollably. Tears blurred her vision. What is happening to me? She stumbled backward, collapsing against the far wall. Her phone buzzed again where it lay on the carpet. She didn't want to touch it, didn't want to see what it said. But her eyes were drawn, unwilling. The screen lit up with a new text. We're just getting started. Amber sat huddled against the wall, her nails digging into her arms until the skin burned. The buzzing of her phone filled the room like a mosquito she couldn't swat away. She didn't want to pick it up, but ignoring it felt impossible. Finally, with trembling fingers, she grabbed the device. Another message flashed across the screen. Check again. Her breath caught. She slowly turned her head toward the laptop lying across the floor. The lid had popped open slightly when it landed, the faint glow of the screen leaking out into the shadows. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She crawled forward, each movement heavy with dread, until she was close enough to see. The stream was still running, despite her throwing the laptop against the wall. And there she was again, on screen. Her double had moved from the bed. The sheets lay crumpled and empty. The figure now stood in the corner of the room, barely visible in the darkness, facing the wall. Amber's stomach twisted. She glanced to the same corner in her real room. Empty. Just an old laundry basket. The figure on the screen twitched. Its head jerked, too sharp like a glitch in a video. Then, slowly it began to turn. Amber slammed the lid shut before she could see its face. She clutched the laptop to her chest, rocking back and forth, trying to breathe. This isn't real. This isn't real. Someone's playing a trick. A sick joke. But who? She lived alone in this apartment. No roommates, no siblings nearby. Only a handful of classmates even knew her address. Her mind spiraled. Maybe her laptop had been hacked. Maybe someone had spliced together old footage of her room, using a deep fake or some kind of filter. That had to be it. Some creep had gotten in her camera. She grabbed the device again and, with shaking hands, powered it completely off. This time she held down the button until the screen went black and stayed black. Her phone buzzed again. Smart, but it won't help. Amber's breath hitched. The phone slipped from her fingers and landed on the bedspread. She didn't sleep the rest of that night. She sat with every light in the apartment on, clutching the kitchen knife she had pulled from a drawer. The shadows shifted and stretched around her, every sound outside making her jump. When dawn finally came, the pale sunlight felt like a lifeline. She forced herself to take a shower, to eat something, to pretend that the night hadn't happened. By afternoon, she convinced herself it was a prank, maybe even a dream. The stress of school, lack of sleep, too much caffeine, it had scrambled her brain. She avoided her laptop, avoided her phone, tried to ground herself in normalcy. But that night, exhaustion won. She collapsed in a bed, fully clothed, lights still on, phone resting beside her. Her dreams were jagged, broken. She wandered through endless hallways that looked like her apartment, but weren't quite right. Walls bending at impossible angles, doors leading to other versions of her own bedroom. And always, always, a camera watching from the corner. She woke with a start. Her phone was buzzing again. 3:14 a.m. Her stomach turned to stone. She didn't want to look, didn't want to know. But her hand moved anyway, sliding across the sheets, lifting the phone. A notification. Live stream is live now. Her thumb trembled as it hovered over the screen. She told herself she wouldn't open it. She couldn't open it. But she did. The same bedroom feed. The same angle. Only now, the bed was empty. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She looked down at herself. She was in bed. She was right here. But on the stream, nothing. Then movement. The camera feed panned slowly, unnaturally, as though the lens itself were turning. It drifted away from the bed, across the dresser, toward the closet door. The closet creaked open wider. Darkness yawned inside. And from that blackness, something stepped out. Amber clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle the scream. It looked like her. Exactly her. Same pajamas, same messy hair. But its eyes were wrong. Too wide. Too dark. The double tilted its head, staring directly into the camera. Then, without warning, it raised a hand and pointed. Amber's real phone buzzed violently in her grip. A new text appeared. Behind you. The knife she had left on the nightstand glinted faintly in the corner of her eye. Her body screamed at her to move, to grab it, to run. But she couldn't. She was paralyzed, every muscle locked with dread. Slowly, she turned her head. The room was empty. But the closet door, her real closet door, was open wider than she remembered. Her phone buzzed again. Don't go back to sleep. Amber dropped the device and scrambled backward off the bed, fumbling for the knife. She clutched it with both hands, the blade trembling in front of her. This isn't real, she whispered. "You're not real." From the laptop, across the room, though she swore she had turned it off, came a faint, distorted laugh. Amber stood frozen in the pale glow of her desk lamp, the knife shaking in her grip. The sound from the laptop, her laptop, which she had sworn she powered off, hissed like static laughter, breaking the silence of her apartment. She forced herself to glance at it. The screen, impossibly alive again, showed her room from the ceiling corner. The angle was the same as always. Only now, the Amber on the stream was no longer in bed, no longer hiding in the closet. She was standing in the middle of the room, and she was smiling. The grin didn't look human. Her lips stretched too wide, teeth gleaming in the glow. Her head tilted at an impossible angle, as if her neck were hinged wrong. Amber's chest heaved. She stumbled backward until her shoulder blades hit the wall. The stream self raised a finger and slowly pressed it to her lips. A shushing motion. Amber shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. This isn't happening. This isn't real. Her phone buzzed on the floor. She didn't want to look, but her eyes betrayed her. Let her in. Amber's stomach lurched. She spun toward the apartment door, expecting to see shadows seeping through the crack beneath it. But the hallway was silent, the bolts still locked. She turned back to the laptop. The stream self was gone. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She scanned the screen. Nothing, just her empty room. She whirled around, half expecting to see the figure behind her. Nothing. She grabbed the laptop and slammed it shut, shoving it under her mattress. Then she unplugged her phone, turned it completely off, and shoved it deep inside her dresser drawer. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against her ears. She didn't sleep the rest of that night, or the next. By the third night, exhaustion carved dark hollows beneath her eyes. Every shadow seemed alive. Every creak of the apartment made her flinch. She'd stopped going to class, ignoring messages from friends. She hadn't told anyone what was happening. Who would believe her? But the strangest thing was how the world outside kept running as if nothing were wrong. She could hear her neighbors through the walls, laughing at sitcom reruns. The sound of traffic outside drifted up through her window. The normalcy felt like mockery, like the universe reminding her that her nightmare was private. And still, every night, something found a way back in. The fourth night, her phone, powered down, hidden, buzzed again. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The screen lit up, though she had sworn it was off. You're not alone. Her throat constricted. She bolted into the bathroom and locked the door. The small space felt safer somehow, walls pressing in, mirror reflecting only herself. She sat on the floor, clutching the knife, rocking back and forth. Hours passed. Her head bobbed with exhaustion, eyelids fluttering. At some point, she must have dozed. She jerked awake at the sound of water dripping. She looked up. The faucet was running. She hadn't turned it on. She scrambled to her feet, shutting it off. Her reflection stared back from the mirror above the sink. Pale, hollow-eyed. Then the reflection smiled. Her own lips hadn't moved, but the reflection's had. The grin spread wide, impossibly wide, teeth gleaming in the harsh bathroom light. Amber stumbled backward, slamming against the door. Stop it! Stop it! The reflection tilted its head. Its lips formed a silent word. Soon, the bathroom light flickered, then went out. Amber screamed. She clawed at the doorknob, throwing herself back into the hallway, gasping for air. Her heart pounded so violently she thought it would tear through her chest. She didn't go back into the bathroom again. Days blurred together. Time lost its grip. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, trapped in a fog of paranoia and terror. On the seventh night, there was a knock at her door. Her whole body went rigid. It was nearly 2 a.m. Nobody should be here. The knock came again. She tiptoed closer, knife in hand, pressing her ear to the wood. Silence. Then a voice, muffled but clear. Amber. Her name, spoken in her own voice. Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears burned her eyes. Amber, the voice repeated, perfectly mimicking her tone, her cadence. Let me in. Her fingers tightened around the knife. Go away, she screamed, her voice breaking. The voice on the other side chuckled. I already am in. The knock stopped. Her knees buckled, and she slid down against the door, clutching the knife to her chest. The apartment fell silent again, but she knew she was not alone anymore. Somewhere in the shadows, something smiled. Amber didn't remember falling asleep. She never meant to. Sleep had become a trap she feared, a door that opened into places she couldn't escape. But exhaustion had stolen her anyway, pulling her under like a riptide. When her eyes opened again, her room looked different. The air was heavy, thicker somehow, as though the oxygen had been replaced by water. The walls leaned inward, bending slightly as though they were breathing. The sound of her own heartbeat thudded in her ears. And then came the glow. Her laptop sat on her desk, its lid open, the blue-white light washing over the walls. She hadn't touched it. She hadn't gone near it since she shoved it beneath the mattress. Yet there it was upright, waiting. Her body moved before her brain caught up. She was standing, crossing the room in slow, dreamlike steps. Her hand trembled as it reached for the trackpad. The live stream was already open. This time, the angle was different. Higher, sharper, looking down at her bed from a place no camera had ever been. The Amber on the screen lay curled beneath the blanket, her chest rising and falling. Asleep, peaceful. But then, slowly, the camera began to pan. The image tilted, sweeping across the room until it pointed directly at her. Not the version of her in bed. Her, the real Amber, standing at the desk, staring at the screen. Her breath stuttered. Her hand flew to her chest. She looked around wildly, scanning for a camera, for any device that could be doing this. But there was nothing, just her apartment, dim and warped with shadows. On the screen, her double at the desk smiled faintly. Amber staggered backward. No. The figure on screen reached forward. Her laptop slammed shut. Amber's scream ripped through the room. She grabbed the device, hurled it across the floor, then bolted into the living room. Her knife was still in her hand, slick with sweat. She collapsed onto the couch, gasping, rocking back and forth as her mind tried to stitch the moment together. Her phone buzzed. Her throat clenched. She didn't want to look. She couldn't look, but the sound pulled at her like a hook. She lifted the phone, dread dripping down her spine. One message. Wake up. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard, gripping the couch with her free hand. She was awake. She knew she was. Wasn't she? Her apartment looked wrong again, subtly tilted, corners not quite aligned. The shadows seemed too deep, too heavy, stretching toward her. She closed her eyes. This isn't real. This isn't real. A whisper, soft and chilling, slid across the room. Yes, it is. Her eyes flew open. The knife clattered to the floor. Someone was sitting in the armchair across from her. Amber's lungs seized. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The figure was her. Exactly her. Same clothes, same face. But the smile, unnatural, too wide, teeth catching the dim light. Her double leaned forward, elbows on knees, as though studying her. You've been watching me, it said in her own voice. Now it's my turn. Amber scrambled off the couch, falling to the floor as her hands scraped across the carpet. She lunged for the knife, but when her fingers closed around it, the blade was gone. Just air. She looked back at the chair. Empty. Her phone buzzed violently in her hand. Almost time. Her whole body shook. She crawled to the door, fumbling with the locks, trying to get them open. She tugged, twisted, pulled with everything she had. The deadbolt wouldn't move. The chain rattled but stayed shut. Behind her, the laugh came again, low, distorted, echoing as though from inside her own skull. She spun around, pressing her back to the door, nails digging into the wood. The apartment stretched before her, every light flickering, walls bending inward, shadows spilling across the floor. In the center of the room, her double stood, no longer smiling, just staring. Amber's scream cracked her throat raw, but the sound felt swallowed by the air itself. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed, sobbing, curling into herself. When she dared to look again, the double was gone. Silence. She didn't know how long she stayed there. Minutes, hours, maybe days. Time no longer meant anything. But when she finally dragged herself back to her bed, too weak to fight, too tired to think, she found her laptop waiting. the screen already glowing, the live stream already running. This time, there was no version of her on screen. No bed, no apartment, just darkness. Then, slowly, words appeared across the feed. Amber couldn't remember the last time she'd felt the difference between night and day. The blinds stayed drawn, and the glow of the laptop had become her only sun. She had tried everything to escape. She had smashed the laptop against the wall until plastic and glass scattered across the floor. She had poured water over it, even thrown it down the trash chute in a desperate frenzy. And yet every time she turned around, it was back, sitting neatly on her desk. Screen open, stream playing. She'd stopped asking how. Now she just sat there, watching. The feed no longer showed her bedroom, not in any way she recognized. It was darker now, the angles warped, as though the room had been stretched into something endless. The walls curved upward, and shadows moved on their own. Sometimes she saw herself on the stream, sleeping, sitting, standing in places she didn't remember being. Sometimes the camera caught glimpses of her double, grinning from corners just out of focus. But more often, the stream just stared back, like the room itself was watching. Amber pressed her hands to her face, whispering prayers she hadn't believed in since childhood. Please, please make it stop. Her phone buzzed. She didn't need to check it. She knew what it would say. We're almost there. Her head snapped up. The laptop's glow shifted, flickering like candlelight. On the stream, her double walked into view. Amber's stomach twisted. It was her again, but different this time. Taller, shoulders sharp, head tilting in jerks like a broken puppet. Its eyes glowed faintly, pale and lifeless. It leaned closer to the camera. "You're ready now?" it whispered in her voice, though the sound came from the laptop speakers. Amber stumbled to her feet, shaking her head violently. "No, I'm not. I didn't ask for this." The double smile cracked unnaturally wide, jaw stretching too far. "You watched," it said. "That's all it takes." Amber clutched her hair, sinking to her knees, screaming until her voice broke. When she dared to look up again, the feed had changed. The camera no longer showed her double. It showed a door, her apartment door. Her heart plummeted. She scrambled across the floor, grabbing the nearest object, her lamp, and hurled it against the door. The crash echoed, but the door itself didn't budge. On the stream, the door handle began to turn. "No!" she shrieked, pounding her fist against the wall. "Stay out." The door on the screen creaked open. Darkness yawned beyond it. Amber scrambled backward until her spine hit the corner of the room. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, panicked gasps. A figure emerged from the doorway on the feed. Amber's vision swam. It was her double again, but not quite. The figure's limbs were too long, joints bending the wrong way. Its head twitched in violent, unnatural jerks. And yet the face, her face smiled. On the feed, the figure stepped into her apartment. And then Amber heard it. The floorboards creaked. Not from the laptop, from her real apartment. Her head whipped toward the hallway. The door was opening. Amber's scream tore from her lungs as she bolted past the desk, into the kitchen, her bare feet slapping against the tile. She snatched a knife from the drawer and pressed herself against the fridge, shaking uncontrollably. Silence. Then from the living room, her own voice. "Amber." Her knife clattered to the floor. The voice was calm, warm, like someone calling her in from a cold. She pressed her hands to her ears, rocking back and forth, whispering, "It isn't real, it isn't real, it isn't real." The lights flickered. The laptop's glow seeped into the kitchen, impossibly bright now, filling the space. When she opened her eyes, the stream had changed again. The camera was in the kitchen, showing her, crouched against the fridge, hands pressed to her ears, eyes wide with terror. She stared at herself on the screen, unable to breathe. The Amber on the feed lowered her hands slowly, almost tenderly. Then she smiled. The real Amber sobbed, shaking her head violently. "Stop, please." Her double on the feed leaned close to the camera. "It's almost over," it whispered. And then the screen went black. Amber sat in the dark, clutching her knees to her chest, rocking on the living room floor. Her tears had long dried, leaving her face streaked and raw. The silence in the apartment pressed, against her like a weight. The laptop had gone black. For the first time in what felt like forever, the stream was gone. But the silence was worse. She didn't trust it. Every shadow in the corners of her apartment seemed alive, waiting for her to move, to breathe too loudly to acknowledge them. The fridge hummed once, and she jumped like a gunshot. She tried not to blink. She tried not to think. She tried to imagine this was all a nightmare. Her phone buzzed. Her stomach dropped. She didn't want to look, but her hand moved anyway, trembling as it brought the screen into view. One message. Look. Her eyes flicked up. The laptop was glowing again. Amber crawled toward it, each movement heavy as though she was moving through wet sand. The screen flared bright, almost blinding. She shielded her face as she got close, and then, against every instinct, she looked. The stream was back, but this time it wasn't her apartment. It was somewhere darker. The walls pulsed like flesh, dripping shadows that moved with a sickening rhythm. The floor looked wet, as though water or blood had seeped into it. Amber's reflection stared at her from the middle of that impossible room. It wasn't the double this time. It was her, Amber. She leaned closer to the screen. The version of herself inside the feed leaned closer too, their faces almost touching through the glass. Amber's breath stuttered. Her reflection spoke. "You let me in." Amber stumbled backward, shaking her head. No, I didn't. I never." The stream flickered. The Amber inside it smiled. "You watched." Amber's body buckled. Her legs folded beneath her, and she collapsed to the floor, clawing at her face as if she could tear the vision out of her skull. On the stream, her reflection pressed its palms flat against the screen. The glass seemed to ripple, bending outward, as though it were soft. The laptop began to hum, low and steady, vibrating against the desk. The reflection leaned closer, its head pressing against the barrier, the glass stretching like skin. Amber screamed, covering her ears, shaking violently. "No, stay away from me." Her phone buzzed. She forced herself to look. One message. Too late. Amber dropped the phone. The laptop screeched, a high-pitched whine that filled the apartment like a blade through the air. The screen split, cracking outward, shards of light and darkness bleeding into the room. Her reflection pushed harder. The glass tore. Her hand, slid through the screen. Amber scrambled backward until her spine hit the wall. "No, you're not me. You're not me." The reflection pulled itself out. Her double stood there, but it wasn't smiling anymore. Its expression was empty, hollow. The eyes were pure white, glowing faintly in the dark. It tilted its head at her, studying her with something colder than hatred, something like hunger. Amber clutched her chest, sobbing. Please, I don't want this anymore. I just want to wake up." The double crouched down in front of her, mirroring her posture perfectly. Then, in her own voice, it whispered, "You never slept." Amber's mind fractured. The words clawed into her brain like hooks, pulling everything apart. She screamed until her throat tore, screamed until the sound dissolved into silence. And then, darkness. When she opened her eyes, she was lying in bed. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds. Birds chirped faintly outside. The air smelled fresh, alive, ordinary. For a moment, she dared to believe. She sat up slowly, rubbing her face. Her heart was still pounding, but she let herself breathe. It had been a nightmare. That was all. She swung her legs off the bed, stood shakily, and walked into the living room. Her apartment looked clean, normal, as though nothing had ever happened. The lamp wasn't broken. The desk was neat. The air was calm. She almost laughed in relief, until she saw the laptop. It was already open on the desk, already streaming. Amber froze. Her stomach turned to ice as her gaze locked on the screen. The feed showed her standing in the living room. Her hands clamped over her mouth. Her body began to tremble. On the stream, her reflection smiled. The laptop's speakers crackled. Then, her own voice filled the room. "You never woke up?"